Lead a life of entrepreneurial freedom with insights from successful creatives, entrepreneurs, and investors. Discover how they overcame challenges and turned their biggest dreams into reality. They share their personal success playbook so you can build the business and life you truly want. Welcome to Passion Millionaire, the podcast by Robert Roth. Rock and roll your dreams.
Welcome to our today's episode of the Passion Millionaire Podcast. I'm, as always, excited to have our guest on. Somebody I've been in touch for almost half a year, we've just figured out, which is amazing because we have met a couple of really great people together, which who knows what business will come out of those contacts and those opportunities when we meet. And he is really great and interesting for me personally because of the experience that he has collected in his past career. He is a brand architect, helping businesses reducing complexity so that they can actually focus on the right things and grow faster. So that means if a company is growing and working on the brand, but it's not working, then he might be the right person. Like he has in the past already helped turning a declining multi-million-dollar company around so that it started growing again at 10% rate and probably more at some point, which we can all see is pretty valuable. So therefore, also personally, I really love in his experience, he has worked for Ramsey Solutions. Maybe you have heard of Dave Ramsey, the guy that helps people get out of debt and actually potentially become a millionaire by just start to treat their personal finances the right way. But side note, and Charlie, I hope you touch on this a little bit. I mean, this guy is running, I don't know how many hundreds of millions in in his company. Last number I heard is like he runs a 500 million plus empire. Probably it's much more. Meanwhile, and he has several companies in this empire, huge real estate empire as well as part of it. So I find that really amazing that you have worked in this company and those experiences, you're using all of it going forward for the clients that you're working with. So really excited to welcome you, Charlie Sells. And it's his real name.
It is.
His name says Sells, and he's helping to sell. Charlie, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. You know, that's been such a good conversation starter for like going out on my own. People are going, is that just a like wishful thinking, or did you just pick that out of a hat? No, it's been my last name my whole life.
Loving it. Feel free to also correct anything or expand on the intro. I'm super curious to get to know you.
Yeah.
And this is the first opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for having me again. So you're exactly right. I have been in branding and marketing and positioning for about 15 years, which there was a 10-year period where I was a youth pastor, and you're like, how does like marketing translate into a church context? But it turns out that when you're the only business person on a church staff, they give you all of the marketing stuff that nobody else wants to do. So I've been doing websites and social media newsletters and messaging and positioning pretty much my entire career, just in different packaging and different sandboxes to play in. And so when that time in my career ended, I did wind up going work for Dave Ramsey and Ramsey Solutions for about 4 years. I got to serve on a couple of teams officially, and then several other little side projects, just kind of here and there. I mean, you want to talk about a company that not only has it dialed in, but you learn so much about other disciplines because, you know, there wasn't just I was a copywriter there specifically, and dabbled a little bit in content strategy and such, but we weren't just in a writer's room all the time waiting to be handed a creative brief so that we could be the machine or, the assembly line just churning out words and such. We were ingrained into the teams and the business units that we were working on. So I had direct access to our developers, to other marketers, to the email data people, to social media. We got to learn cross-functionally while we are building these brands and doing some really incredible work. So I didn't just learn about my own craft. I learned about so much else in marketing. 4 years really did feel like 10 from an experience standpoint, because you do have to jump in and grow and adapt, or you're not really going to make it very long there. So Man, I had a lot of fun, learning from Dave, especially. Dave was leading our Monday staff meetings most of the time, giving company-wide updates. And, there's 16 or 17 business units, or at least there were at the time when I was there. So it's not just, the radio show and the books. There's so much else going on. There's curriculum, there are digital products, there's, speaking, all kinds of things that are happening in the background that most people may not know that are associated with the company. But yeah, it was a great season. I loved my time there. Loved the teams I got to work on, and it really did help prepare me for being an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, a founder, and all the things that I get to do today as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's pretty exciting. And so it means you have personally met Dave as well.
I did, yes.
Okay. How is he as a person? I'd be curious. Is he the same as on the YouTube channel, or is it somehow different?
It's a yes and.
Okay.
He certainly is consistent as that personality. But when you get into a room with somebody of that caliber, they're in a different mode. They're in business mode, not necessarily speaking or personality mode. And I remember every employee who makes it through their first 90 days of employment, they get to have dinner with Dave and several members of the board, and you get to ask questions and say like, you changed my life. How would you do anything differently? What's your next book, etc. And it was also very common to see him in the lunch lane. There was a cafeteria on site, and so this is also I'll tell a story here that was kind of unique to my position specifically. But there's not many places where a CEO really takes the time to do that on a weekly and maybe even sometimes on a daily basis. Always approachable, always very personable, always willing to, talk and share stories and whatnot. I even met him a couple of times at some of our company social events. But I'll tell you what, one of my favorite things, and I was told this when I got hired as a writer and somebody who has to convey content on behalf of the brand. One of my directives was go down and watch the show for an hour or a segment every single day. In what other context can you think of there's a CEO who talks directly to his customers for 3 hours a day? I can't think of many other, big companies that do that, maybe other than the secret undercover boss kind of scenarios, right?
Right.
But that was great because you get to hear firsthand how he talks, how his cadence, his rhythm, how he presents ideas, and you just get to soak it up. And it was honestly one of my favorite parts of the job, where if I had a free afternoon, and I'm putting that in quotes because they worked us pretty hard, but if I had just a moment, or I was feeling maybe a disconnect from the customers we actually served, it was great to be able to walk down and hear somebody do a debt-free scream, or listen to a call of somebody who's in a near impossible situation and trying to navigate out of it. So man, there's just not much else I could be grateful for, from a leader. And he's a genius business guy too. Some of the things that he has tried and succeeded at are still around to this day. It's almost a 35-year-old company. So, there's a lot to say for longevity there too.
I find that quite exciting. So you literally were sitting in the podcast studio. Is that what you were saying?
Well, yeah, they have a radio studio because it's still broadcast, and they do use it for podcasts and such. But it's a live show every day for 3 hours, and so you can just stop in and listen, and maybe even sometimes be on the YouTube feed and wave in the background and such. But it was also like transparently, like from my seat as a marketer, we could also go do customer research because it's a destination for a lot of people who are fans of the show or have had their lives changed by some of the tools and some of the curriculum. And so it was not uncommon for us to go down with a computer and a set of questions and just ask for feedback, or maybe even test a new idea to say, does this make sense? Does this seem like it fits within the ecosystem, or is this something you would actually use? How would you change it? So a lot of firsthand customer experience and customer research goes on in that lobby as well.
Yeah, quite interesting. What would you say are your biggest learnings from that time at Ramsey Solutions that you could, take with you when it comes to, entrepreneurship, as you have touched on that he's a master at that. And then also when it comes to marketing, right? And as well as brand architecture.
Yeah, I mean, very simply, culture really is everything if you're in a business like that. There's 1,000 people that work at that company. So you can imagine there's a lot of different personalities, a lot of different skill sets, and bringing everybody together under one umbrella is incredibly hard. And over a period of years, as they developed company values and said, this is who we are, and inviting people to be on that mission, it is a very mission-centric company. And even in the very beginnings of the interview process, you learn very quickly whether you're a right fit or not, because they're very clear about this is what we believe, this is what we stand for, and this is what we want you to be a part of.
Mhm.
And so I got to give a lot of credit to everyone who has shaped that, because it wasn't just Dave. It was a whole litany of people and some of the team members and board members and such that have really made that happen. So company culture wise, they do it really well there. And that is not about ping pong tables and free burritos or anything like that. It is there. They say it every staff meeting. This is who we are. This is what we believe. It's a constant reminder. And I mean, it's just at the forefront. It's not just a bullet point in an employee handbook. It's central to who they are. So I'd say from an entrepreneurship standpoint, culture is king in that regard. Man, from a marketing standpoint, I would not be who I am today without some of the leaders that helped shape me at that company. One of which gave me the not the idea, but sort of the seed of the idea for what I do now in my business, Clarity Over Everything. I'll never forget being challenged. I'm coming in as a very entry level copywriter of sorts, at least where the company was concerned. And I was challenged by one of my leaders to think about, how can you make sure that a meeting won't start without you there? And I knew immediately it was not going to be because I was the smartest person in the room or because I knew the most or I had the most experience, because I didn't have any of those things. So I made a commitment right then and there to be the person who asks the best questions. And that made me a very valuable perspective in some of these meetings. And out of that, somebody said, if you become the person who drives for clarity over everything, then you will make a big impact on your team, and people will depend on you in new ways. And that's where the idea of clarity over everything sort of came from.
Mhm. Yeah, makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. And in terms of marketing, brand architecture, like what would you say did you learn there that maybe also shapes your work right now that you're doing with your clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. There were several people at the company, our chief creative officer and some of our other senior creative leaders. I can't tell you the number of hours that they worked on branding, brand positioning, visual identity, consistency, some of the core pillars that I now bring to small business owners and leaders. And I mean, the amount of times we would just have either a monthly or a quarterly, like, this is what this brand is and this is what it stands for. I mean, that really helped shape a lot of how I view building a brand. And I mean, there was a catalog of brand standards where if I wanted to go see how another business unit was operating or how they're talking to their customers, I could go pull that up and say, this is their target audience, this is their core beliefs, this is how it translates out, and here are some examples. And it was that way for every single brand, every single personality, everything in the company. They just had a very well documented process. But I think at the end of the day, it went beyond, this is what our logo looks like, or this is the right word to use here. It really got down to the why we exist and who we exist for and how we create products, how we create brands, how we express that in the marketplace. And yes, of course, there was competitor analysis. It'd be dumb not to talk about some of those things, but
Yep.
it really did center around, if everybody is clear and aligned about what our brand is, then everybody can own their role and go faster. And again, those are some of the principles that I bring into some of the work that I do in positioning and strategy, to say, as long as everybody knows the direction that we're going, every single person is now freed up to do more of what they are good at, including you as a leader or as a business owner. And that has been a great paradigm shift for a lot of folks that I work with, thinking, oh, I don't have to solve all the problems. I just need to help set the direction and support everybody in their role. And that's a big unlock for a lot of leaders.
Yeah, I like that. And how does that look in a practical example? Let's say maybe, this company that you've helped turn around from, being in a negative numbers to then start making profits again in the 2 digits, 10+%, whatever that exactly was.
Yep.
Maybe that's a good example, or feel free to pick another one. But like, what exactly, when you're working with a company that is actually not getting the results that you want, that is tied up with trying to figure this out, branding, brand architecture, and then getting the impact of, having resources freed up while increasing their profits. So what exactly are you doing with a company like this?
That's a great example too, and I have to give a lot of credit to the GM that I worked with directly. When we first got together, when we were talking about goals, and it wasn't necessarily around KPIs, it wasn't necessarily around revenue numbers. It was a very simple mandate. It was, we want to duplicate the in-store experience online. And that was not like we're going to create AI bots to, look, sound, and feel like us necessarily, but how we communicate, the frequency, the information that we share. We just want it to be consistent with when they walk into our store, this is what they experience. And that as a bedrock made the difference, because now we know that's the filter through which we look at how we write emails, how we do social media, how we do promotions, how we do campaigns. Do we do campaigns? And I think that's one of the pieces that a lot of business owners skip over, is they just think it's about tactics and not necessarily about the positioning and the strategy first. I've had other business owners who will come to me and say, I think I need to do this. And I'll think, okay, that's a tactic. So what motivates you to do that tactic? I'm also thinking about what happens after that particular step, or what happens before that particular step in the entire ecosystem of the brand. So if they're not positioned in some of these other areas, then it doesn't help anything to do more stuff. It helps to do the right things and maybe even correct some of the things that are off a little bit. And I think that's part B to it. I think there's a misconception that when you work with an agency or a consultant, that all of a sudden we're going to get this big, long to-do list of new things or new initiatives or twice the work or anything like that. And I make a really concerted effort to say on the front end, my goal is not to create more work for you. My goal is to make your life easier. And so we're going to continue to do the things that are working while phasing in some of these new things that are going to help move the needle for you. And that's what this company did. They didn't stop doing anything that was already working. We just added some things in strategically, and over a period of months where you can see, we want to go up and to the right over a period of time, regardless of seasonality or cycles or anything. So, that's essentially in the seat that I sit in. That's one of the core things that I try to communicate is we're not trying to do more. We're just trying to do things better. And sometimes that means more, and sometimes that just means improving the things that we're actually already doing.
Yeah, and tactically, like, what exactly did you do there, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. They had a great customer database, just a few thousand people from, 12, 13 years of doing business that they really hadn't done anything with. The last newsletter I think they had sent was maybe 2 or 3 years prior. There wasn't a ton of, regular communication going on. And so my encouragement to the business was, you have to understand that it's going to take a little time to retrain this audience about what to expect. Some of the conventional marketing wisdom for the longest time was it takes maybe 18 to 20 touch points before a message really sticks or breaks through. And I'm not going to say it took 20 emails or 20 communications necessarily, but I think the principle still stands that if you are doing something new, it's not going to necessarily have a viral or an overnight effect. And I believe the brands that win are the ones that are clear and consistent over time, not just the ones that are trying to go for the flash in the pan necessarily. So I think that really helped set the table and really the framework for what happens when we do this, and this. What do we expect to see? What are some of the low-level tests that we can do? Subject line A/B tests are a great place where that's a very low-risk thing. Segmenting audiences and seeing how different ones react to different messages. That's a big piece of what I preach. Like, if we're able to target and segment specific audiences, that gives us better data to know, are we communicating the right things? I had another client that's totally separate industry where we tried very hard to get some content off of the ground. And it just wasn't getting a lot of traction, but we had this sense that the audience did want to hear from us. And so we tried something totally different. It was completely free. It was just like a replay link from one of the live streams that had happened. And wouldn't you know, we saw almost 100x return on that, where people were clicking and watching and viewing. And so they made a shift. They made a pivot away from, some of the traditional. I'm sorry?
That was all organically or with ad spend on top?
It just happened. No,
Okay.
it was totally organic. I stuck a replay link in an email and said, hey, if you missed this thing, you can watch it here. And truly like 100x, return on all of that. So they totally shifted.
How big were the numbers? 100x? Was it one first and then 100? Or
it was, you're not terribly off. It was more like 7 or 8, from 80 people, 80 people-ish registered, 8 people showed up. And then when we did the replay link, almost 800 people watched, out of a list of about 5,000, came back to watch the replay. And so they totally shifted their content strategy to say, how can we still provide value and get in front of the audience with the right message? Because people do want to hear from us. And it's really paying off in spades.
It's a small thing in this case because the numbers are pretty low comparatively to bigger companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's a very, very big thing because it shifts everything going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, you know what works.
Yeah.
And therefore, you can jump on that and then go crazy on that. And then that will help the company to grow faster and faster and faster by literally knowing exactly what the audience really wants, while they didn't have any idea at all before you were doing that. So I want to point that out, how even though small numbers, but how big of a thing that really is.
Well, and I think about the effect that it had internally as well, Robert, because the people who are creating this content now are re-energized to make more and better content because they now don't feel like they're wasting their efforts or their time on something that has very, very marginal returns. Now they see the potential and it's been proven out and they think, oh, all we have to do is replicate that style or, that medium, and we're going to see very similar results. And now they're really excited about what's next for their brand. They actually want to make stuff. They don't feel like it's a test or a task rather.
I mean, that's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for adding that.
Sure.
Totally makes sense. Excited about it. I'd be curious also, going forward, like you're working with the companies right now, you're seeing the results that you're seeing, like your own company, like where do you see that going in the next 5 years? I'm just always curious to learn that as well, because there's always a vision and then there is you staying in contact, right? And then hopefully seeing that vision coming into fruition and also, hopefully right people hearing that and potentially knowing, okay, I mean, that it makes sense to at least have a chat. So I'd be curious to know where are you going? Where's your company going? And who probably is going to be a part of that journey?
It's a great question. I've been doing this full time, as a solopreneur for about 2 years. And this is the very first year I've set any kind of number goal. I think a lot of times when we stumble and fumble into entrepreneurship, it's, just keep the wheels on or, have some very, if I have a look back at the last 12 months, what's my average and, how can I grow that by 20% or whatever, which I think are all really good. One of the things that I learned from Dave and several of the other entrepreneurs that I am very close with is, if you serve enough people, you don't really have to worry about money. And that sounds very pie in the sky. I know, to just kind of say, oh yeah, just go work with people and the rest will take care of itself. So in that same vein, I did make a goal for myself this year, which is to work with 26 brands in 2026. Very on the nose, very, very content centric, right? But I mean, I've also done the math behind that and said, if it's in a one-off capacity, a retainer capacity, or a project capacity, that will help my company grow by however many percent. So, that's just like from an owner's seat or a founder's seat. Something that I really wanted to focus on this year was getting in front of more of the right people, not just taking anything that kind of comes my way. So, but the thing that I spent a lot of last year building that is turning out to be very valuable to brands who need more of a short-term engagement is about a 30-day brand intensive where from start to finish, I do a full audit. I do, the typical discovery calls and get my head around what's going on in your brand, some of the problems you're trying to solve, some of the goals that you have. And then I do a half day or a 1 day clarity and alignment sprint it's brainstorming on steroids. It's a lot all in 1 day, but it is so much fun to do because there are all of these breakthrough moments where somebody goes, yeah, we really shouldn't be doing that. Or, hey, what if? And the dreaming comes out again and the vision casting really gets rich. And so then from there, the deliverable for that whole process is there's a 90-day punch sheet to say, like, here are the priorities we have to tackle in the next 3 months. Otherwise, it's not going to move the needle. And again, we're not stopping anything that works. We're possibly pausing some things that don't work to pull over to the side of the road and fix them. But we're also not going to shut anything down because that would be detrimental to the business. And so it's continuing the things that are working and starting to intentionally focus on the things that have to be fixed. And then I also give a 12-month roadmap for what the brand could look like over the next year if you do a phased approach. And the beauty about that particular piece, Robert, is I can help implement some of that as a strategic advisor or a fractional role, or you can just take that to your internal marketing team or an agency and say, here's exactly what we want to do. Now help us accomplish that. And the reason that I think that's so valuable is it gives an owner confidence because they're a part of it. I'm not a typical consultant in that regard. I'm not coming in with a playbook and saying, these are all of the new things that you're going to do. And, you've paid me all this money, so good luck and have fun. I really strive to be a collaborative partner in the midst of all of that, so that we are locking arms together and creating that entire piece as a team, so that I don't sit in a seat above anybody. I'm sitting right beside you, doing the work and helping it come to fruition.
Yeah, sounds exciting. So there's a lot of growth coming. I do see also the movement, the growth that you have made since we have met for the first time, which is quite
That's right.
exciting. I'm very happy for you also.
Oh man, that unconfident version of me, I'm sure we could go back and punch it and be like, hey, listen, it's going to be okay. You need 2 more pieces to unlock it, and then you're off to the races.
Yeah. So in the future, it sounds like there's team coming that you're gonna build in your company and all of that, which is super exciting. And let me ask you a question. If you look back a little bit, because there is also, I know that for a fact, people listening that are building themselves up. That you are at the point of where you have a stable, a stable career. The maybe one-man show with a tiny team of people around you that is growing now. But still, that is something that some people are working to establish right now. And for those who are listening, or who knows, maybe even some of them still in a job, right, that is providing the money and they want to work the way out of that. I'd be curious, when you look back, what was the time of hardship that you might have encountered to get to where you are today, and what are your learnings from that? So what would you probably do differently if you had to start over again, going out of a career, a job, steady income, to be where you are today? Like, what was the hardship and how did you overcome it?
Those first 6 months were really hard. I think all of us launch out thinking if you don't have a product, because in a lot of ways I'm a service in what I do. And so if you don't necessarily have a product or you don't have numbers or an ROI to go off of, it really does kind of feel like I'm constantly trying to prove myself and get in front of the right people. And if I can just have a conversation, then they're going to see the value in it. I think my problem was a little more specific, where what I thought I was going to be doing initially is a very small percentage of what I'm actually doing now. I thought I was just going to do content and copywriting and strategy, but at the end of the day, I realized it goes way beyond that. And so, just in a moment of curiosity at the end of those first 6 months, I asked my client mix at the time, "Can you describe what I do for you?" Unprompted, like personal conversation. They couldn't write anything down or think about it. I just said, "Tell me what I do for you." And wouldn't you know, almost none of it had anything to do with content. It was all around problem solving, advisory work, and all of that. And I think most entrepreneurs, they feel like they have to give themselves a full year or a certain amount of time just to let things sit. But if we're not constantly evaluating and even asking the people who are on the receiving end of our services, how is this actually working for you? You're never really going to know, number one, the impact that it's making, but number two, the next direction. Those conversations directly shifted everything that I did last year in 2025 and what I was building and how I was building it. And so my encouragement to anybody starting out is go ahead and start. Like, do the work, do the prospecting, get your first set of clients, but don't necessarily get married to that model or that way of doing business, because it's probably going to change. And I think everybody that I know who's a solopreneur or an entrepreneur would say the same thing, that something shifted, either by my choosing or some other force that caused me to do it. So yeah, that'd be my encouragement, even to myself. If I could go back and tell myself that when I first started a couple of years ago, I think I would have breathed a little bit easier and not just hung my hat on, I have to have the perfect offer, I have to have the perfect list of services, I have to have all of this proof. I mean, it can be squishy, and you really do have to get in and do the work before you truly discover how things kind of function and what you should be focused on.
Yeah, it's I can agree with that. That's a very smart question to ask. So what did I do for you? What am I actually doing for you? Very, very, very smart way to get feedback from whoever you're working with right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you might be able to learn something. I love that. Charlie, so before I'm going to ask you the closing question for our episode today, I'd be curious, like, if somebody has listened and finds something valuable, wants to get in touch with you, wants to figure some more details, potentially even wants to work with you, like, what are the best ways to get in touch with you?
LinkedIn is always a great place because that's where a lot of this stuff happens. So search me up. It's Charlie Sells on LinkedIn. I don't remember the exact URL, but I don't think there's very many
I'll
of
link
us.
it in the show notes. Okay,
Perfect.
LinkedIn.
Yep, great.
Sells.
And then you can also go to clarityovereverything.com. You can see just an overview of my philosophy on branding and some of the options of how I can help. I mean, anything from advisory work to full-scale fractional roles. I even do weddings. So if you're in the Nashville area, you need a wedding done, I can be your officiant too. That's still an ordained pastor for for all that's reason. But on the branding and the marketing side, for me, it's everything from one-off projects all the way up through some of the more involved roles. But I'm really focusing this year on those short-term engagements because, number one, they provide a ton of value in a very, very short amount of time, and number two, it's an adrenaline shot for your branding and your marketing efforts. It's not. I'm going to be honest with everybody. It is not like traditional consulting. I'm just going to put that out there right now. I'm going to ask questions you've never thought of. I'm going to get you thinking differently about your brand. And at the end of, whatever that 30, 60, 90-day period looks like, you're going to be so much happier with how everything looks, sounds, and feels, the consistency that you have, and you're going to be freed up to do a lot more of what you're best at rather than solving problems that you just don't want to solve.
That's awesome. Here is my final question for you, Charlie.
Sure.
Let's get the audience thinking right now. What is a question that everybody should at least give a shot, think about it, that might change the direction of the business into growth?
The question I love to ask is, when is the last time that you got curious about your brand? I think so many leaders get stuck in position. They get stuck in certainty. They get stuck in, I have a million other things to worry about, so I just need to give fast answers and I need to move on, or I need to give the bare minimum, or unfortunately, because I said it once, it should just trickle down, and the assumption is that it's going to happen. I encourage leaders and owners all the time to get curious about their brand again. Think about my favorite question to ask is, what is it like to be on the receiving end of your brand and your marketing efforts? That will uncover a whole list of things. Are we being consistent? That's a big one. Are we being concise? Are we being competitive? Or are we just trying to chase trends and do some viral flash in the pan stuff that may or may not move the needle? So curiosity, I believe, is the thing that unlocks clarity. It's really the first step in one of the frameworks that I take people through, because it will cause you to ask more questions rather than just assume you know the answers. It will cause you to bring different voices into the conversation that you didn't realize needed to be there, all the way from somebody in a different discipline, all the way down to the people who are actually making the stuff that you are selling. Those are very valuable voices. So curiosity is the key. That's if I get to preach one thing about branding for the rest of my life, I think it's going to be, at whatever level you are, don't assume you know. Get curious about your brand and your market.
Loving it. Charlie, Appreciate it. Thanks again for hopping on the podcast with me. Thanks again for sharing those stories, experiences, learnings, and now also this question that you're leaving our audience with today. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you, Robert.
Go to rockandrollyourdreams.com/podcast.